All right, CJ, good to see you again. And
Good to be back.
here we are back on Brave the New World for May 28th, 2026. And maybe the first thing that we can talk about is the Iran war update. It's like, will they or won't they? Is the question. And it seems like every day or so, what comes from the U.S. media is, oh, we're close to a deal. And then the Iranian media or government is like, no, we're really not. But today it seemed to be at least it seemed like deal is imminent was kind of in the air. And I don't know. I mean, I'm hopeful about it. But then when I read kind of the elements of the deal, and then I listen to other things that Trump has said, and other parts of his administration have said the last couple of days, it seems like maybe this isn't the case. But anyway, so here's what the deal supposedly includes. And this is what tips me off as maybe it's not real. 1, 60-day period of ceasefire that will launch negotiations on Iran's nuclear program. So the first thing is like, okay, well, they haven't decided on it, but they're just saying, oh, we're going to ceasefire while we think about this like crux of the negotiations. The second one is that there will be free travel through the Strait of Hormuz, no tax imposed. So during the 60 days, and then the other ones are kind of negligible, except for ceasefire around the region. And the other one that I think is kind of unbelievable, but would be amazing, is U.S. troops have to leave the area. So, without coming to any like real agreement on nuclear or any real agreement on, there's no way that Iran, for the first thing. But the second thing, there's no way that Iran is going to be okay with allowing ships through Hormuz without paying a toll. Whether they call it environmental cost or environmental tax or whatever, or a toll, it doesn't matter. They're not, I don't believe that they would do that. Like that solidifies their dominance in the region. Mm. And then I don't believe that the United States is, I hope it's so, but I don't believe that they would just leave the area. Even though, I mean, one point in the favor of maybe they would is because all of the bases are destroyed, and to fix them up would cost billions and billions and billions of dollars. So maybe they're just not going to do that. But I find that hard to believe they would just leave during the 60-day period. So it's just, and then to have no agreement on what's going to be done with the nuclear material. It's like, I just don't, it just doesn't seem real. Like, what do you think about this stuff?
I'm very skeptical for a bunch of reasons. One is that, like, how many times have we heard over the past few months, like, oh, we're about to have a deal, or, so yeah. Just in general, I'm like Charlie Brown, with the football kind of mindset of like, I don't buy it. The Trump administration was full of shit the last 15 times he said this. And I still can't believe that anybody gives any credence to anything that anyone in his administration, him included, says about this, because everything has been either a lie or just like just completely wrong, even if they weren't intentionally lying in every case. And so, yeah, I don't see Trump bringing the troops home from the Middle East, even though that would probably be quite popular with most average American people under the age of 65. And I just don't see him doing that because of who he is and his obsession with how he's perceived and his obsession with always being perceived as winning. I think that even if the American people, like huge majorities, were fine with it and actually thought it was great, I don't see him doing it just because then the neocons whose support he has cultivated so heavily over the past year and a half, they're going to cry bloody murder. Who knows what Netanyahu and the Israeli government is going to say and do in that circumstance. I really don't think Netanyahu is going to let Team America leave the Middle East without some kind of real resistance to that, possibly including a false flag or two. And so, yeah, and then you look at the Iranian side, and it seems like every time Trump says there's this, oh, we're about to have a deal, when he rattles off the outlines of the alleged deal, it's always things that the Iranians have been saying forever are like non-negotiable.
Yeah.
He's basically claiming that like they've caved entirely on the things that they have said are like absolutely non-negotiable. And it really is difficult for me looking at it from the Iranians' perspective, and they've been quite rational this whole time. For people who are supposedly, these wild-eyed,
Savages.
oh yeah, these barbarian, 8th century Islamic lunatics who are just suicidal, like they've been very rational and like calculating about everything, and very strategic. Certainly they've been much more rational and strategic than the Trump administration has been about everything. And I just don't see them, given the status quo and given what they want and what they have said over and over are their non-negotiables, I don't see them giving on those. And I also don't see them trusting the American government and the Israeli government. Why would they? They were attacked twice during negotiations. They were surprise attacked twice, one of which included the assassination of their leader and a bunch of their other top people. Why on earth would anybody, whether they're wild-eyed jihadis or the most, rational materialists you could ever find, why would anybody say, well, given that track record, if Trump says he's going to, honor his side of the deal this time? I mean, it was Trump who unilaterally, pulled out of the JCPOA for no reason, even though the Iranians it wasn't even alleged that they were breaking it, let alone proven. So I certainly wouldn't trust them. And I think that it would take some significant gesture to even cause them to realistically entertain the idea that this time Trump is serious about making a real deal and sticking to it. It would need some significant concession on his part, like unfreezing all those assets and, maybe a few other things. But I just don't see them, given the track record. I don't see them really agreeing to much without some significant kind of like preemptive gestures from the American side. And again,
Exactly.
the fly in the ointment is always Netanyahu and the Israelis. Obviously, they control Trump pretty strongly. They've got him on a very short choke chain. But even if Trump decides, you know what, I'm the president of the freaking United States, and I'm going to actually be the president of the United States and not let, the head of some country that has a third as many people as Florida keep telling me what to do. I don't see Netanyahu just being like, well, I lost, so I guess I'm going to have to, take my orders from the president now instead of vice versa, and just letting that slide. Again, all kinds of things he could do, releasing whatever material he's got on Trump, which must be pretty damning given all the circumstantial evidence of how Trump, kowtows to him. And could that cause like a political scandal and takedown of Trump, like something so bad that even a lot of Republicans are like, this is beyond the pale. We've got to get rid of this guy, Trump, we've got to impeach him. Would he do false flags? The Israeli government has a huge track record going back to well before either of us were born of doing false flags that we know of. And probably they've done a bunch of other ones they haven't been caught doing or admitted to. And so I just don't see any way that a deal can be made given Trump is the president of the United States, Netanyahu is the prime minister of Israel. I just don't. And I'm not happy to say that because I agree with the people who are warning that the world economy already is going to be paying a price for like
just
a
not
year
feeling the
or
effects
longer.
yet. Or we're barely feeling the effects. Like we see the gas prices. I think I paid $4.40 or something a couple of days ago.
Mm-hmm.
We're seeing the gas prices, but we're not seeing the heavy inflation that's going to come anyway. Even if we open the strait today, we're going to see the repercussions of this months out. And the longer this goes, the harder it's going to be.
Yeah, and the agriculture and the food supply to the world is one of the things that concerns me the most, because that's something that even more so than the energy itself doesn't show up until months and months down the line. But already you've heard that, farmers all over the world, including in this country, are like not able to plant as much crops as they normally would because they can't get the fertilizer at all, or it's so exorbitantly priced that it would bankrupt them.
Yeah.
And so like I think even if they magically made a deal and stopped everything and opened the Strait of Hormuz today,
still problems.
There's going to be hell to pay down the road with food shortages and and
it's just going to be it's just going to be worse in countries who are not as insulated from it. Like, Africa is really going to get hit. We're going to see starvation because of this, and it's just going to keep getting worse. The other thing, not just, and I completely agree with you in terms of why would Iran trust the United States? Because there's no reason to have any trust. But so why would they sign without any sort of concessions? And that's when, looking at this list, I'm like, if the United States was like, oh, we're going to release $21 billion in assets that we have frozen from Iran as like a gesture of goodwill as part of this process, well, then they have something to hang their hat on. But like, there's nothing. It's just like they're sort of agreeing not to shoot at each other, I guess, while they talk about other things. But the other part of it is Iran is really negotiating from a place of strength. Like, they have shown that they are resilient to the United States military. Military action is not going to shake free the Strait of Hormuz from Iran. It's just not going to do it. Like, there's just no way, because of they have an incredibly long shoreline and nooks and crannies and buried missile launchers, and it doesn't take a battleship to stop ships from going through the strait. It takes mines or relatively cheap drones or missiles that they can launch from the coast. It's only 21 miles across, like very easy for them to hit shit from anywhere in that country. So they have a position of strength there. So why would they do anything it would be like a favor to the United States? I mean, they would just be better off waiting it out until Trump's like, we just got to get out of here. Let's just go home. Victory, and let's go home. So yeah, when I saw the reports, they seemed very strong from Axios and then from a number of other outlets today, and looking like like things were really positive. But then I looked at the details. I'm like, this doesn't look legit. Why would they ever sign?
Yeah. I think, realistically, the only way I could see a deal actually being made and accepted by both sides and sticking, and again, who knows what the hell the Israelis would do about it, but would be if Russia or China, or probably both, if they intervened diplomatically, because from what I've heard, the Russian and Chinese leadership seems to be somewhat ambivalent about the whole thing, where Iran is their ally. They don't want to see Iran fall. And while they don't want war with the U.S., they also, don't want to give the U.S. a whole bunch of unearned, victory and concessions and goodies. But at the same time, Russia and China, like, they at least currently are really kind of cautious and conservative in their foreign policy. The invasion of Ukraine being an exception, but you could argue that was after, like,
decades.
A couple decades of like really, really bad provocations, and Putin just putting up with it again and again and again, and finally saying, all right, I'm done. I still don't think Putin would have preferred to have invaded Ukraine, but he felt he had no choice given the provocations. But the Russians and the Chinese, if they decide that this is just causing too much instability in the world, because China's got the biggest petroleum reserves in the world, so they can weather this much better than the U.S. or Europe can, or East Asian countries can. And Russia, of course, is a massive energy exporter. So in some ways, this is great for them. They're able to export more energy and sell it at a higher price than they could before this stupid war.
They're one of the winners of this thing.
Yeah. But at the same time, I still think that like Putin and Xi, they don't want anything to spiral too far out of control in terms of the war escalating, or even just like global chaos, because if there's famine in much of the third world, that's going to cause all kinds of instability and problems that, could affect China's interest dramatically and whatever. So I never thought I'd say this, but like, I'm actually rooting that the Russian and Chinese leadership, who seem to be much more intelligent and grown up and professional than America's leadership, that and they're like the moderating force on everything in the world right now, that they will like use the pull they have with Iran to, and they could also make some guarantees maybe that could cause the Iranians to think they could trust Americans because, the Chinese and Russians are parties to the deal on some level too. So, that might be our only hope, is that the Chinese and Russians save us, which is bizarre.
I know. And I was thinking the same thing. It's like, wow, I actually am kind of rooting for that. That it hurts me to my core to think of that. But like, but hoping that they help get us out of this thing. I mean, help Trump save face to such a degree that he feels like he can stop it, because the alternative is too dire. I mean, even if it just is a stalemate for a while and ships are not going through Hormuz, we're talking about starvation. We're talking about higher costs of everything, massive inflation, huge economic upheaval. And that's the best case. Like, the worst case is a lot more people dying, including escalation of violence that ends up with some sort of whatever. Who knows? Who knows? Like, but if the United States starts trying to take any territory or whatever, and not only that, but like, it also, one of the things that Iran is really interested in is making sure that the shit going on in southern Lebanon stops, which is an absolute tragedy. It's not talked about a lot. The Gaza stuff is that's supposed to be a ceasefire. That's not talked about enough anymore because of this Iran thing. The stuff that's going on in the West Bank is still horrible, and what's going on in southern Lebanon is unforgivable. You've got it's not just southern Lebanon. Over the weekend, Netanyahu and the IDF bombed Beirut and other cities in central and northern Lebanon, and we're talking thousands of people are dead, and you're seeing all like the medical workers being targeted and the press being targeted in southern Lebanon. It's unimaginable, like, what's happening. And so, they maybe Iran sticks it out to make sure that stops. But if they don't, if we don't get a deal done, and if Russia and China don't step in and help us get a deal done and help Iran get a deal done, maybe that escalates in Lebanon, and we start seeing another genocide in southern Lebanon like we saw in Gaza. So there's a lot on the line right now, and economic there's a terrible price to pay, but that's the least of the devils that will pop out if this thing continues. Yeah, but I was hopeful when I first started scrolling this morning and looking at some of these reports, but then looking into the details, I don't know. But if Russia and China, I mean, the perfect time for this was when Trump was in China last week or whenever it was. Like, that was the perfect time to announce, like, to try to figure something out, to announce something, and that it didn't was a big disappointment. So,
yeah, that whole Chinese trip was pretty
uneventful.
Useless. Yeah, and what I kept hearing from like retired diplomats and retired intelligence people, that I trust on podcasts and things like that, what they were telling me, because a lot of these people, they still have contacts, inside these different departments and whatever, and they were saying it was really unprecedented how much the Trump administration just flat out did not prepare for the China visit.
That's what you hear about these negotiations in Iran too, with that the United States delegation is not prepared. They don't even know what they're talking about with the nuclear stuff.
Yeah.
I'm not surprised.
Yeah. And, it would be one thing if you had Trump, this arrogant commander in chief, who's like, well, I don't need to do my homework. Like, I can just show up to any negotiation and win. Like, yeah, forget, all of your track record. That's the opposite of that. Like, but even if he was that arrogant, like, you would hope this is where, like, maybe the deep state could do something useful, where like there's actually some knowledgeable professionals, like, experts on the Middle East and stuff like that, who at least could quietly behind the scenes do some of the real diplomacy, or the people that are actually like professional diplomats and know, how to interact with the Chinese and whatever, that they could kind of, quietly like, hey, don't listen to his stupid bluster. Let's actually work on a real diplomatic deal. But like, all I'm hearing is that there's none of that even happening. And so, you look into these like summits during the Cold War, like when Reagan would meet with Gorbachev, or, when, I don't know, Nixon would meet with Brezhnev or whatever. And they would have these, big photo op meetings and summits and big handshake for the press and whatever like that. But they usually had some kind of substantive agreement of some sort, whether it was arms limitation or a big trade deal. Yeah. And the truth is that just like in big business deals, corporate stuff, the deal is always made, like at least 90%, if not 100%, before the big,
Yeah.
meeting happens. It's already all worked out, and the big meeting is just sort of like ratifying it and providing the public with a photo op. And so when you hear that Trump didn't have any like preparation of like professional American diplomats from the State Department who are China and Middle East experts over there talking with their counterparts in China for weeks before he went, it's like, well, of course nothing
What'd
came
they
out.
do?
He really just believed that he would just sort of like walk in and bluster at Xi and do his stupid, I'm a corporate psychopath routine that he does, and that Xi would just be like, bewitched in the same way that, a barely literate.
Can you imagine that guy being bewitched? I don't know that I've seen him smile. Like, you can't fuck with that guy. What was Trump thinking?
Yeah. And he's, obviously he's much more intelligent and knowledgeable than Trump.
Yeah.
And so, probably everybody in his administration is much more intelligent and knowledgeable than everyone in Trump's administration. And so they're not stupid. They know who's in the superior position and who's not in this situation. They're not going to just suddenly be, talked into giving away the store to Trump for no reason.
Do you think Trump brought in Hegseth because he feels threatened if someone is smarter than him? So he like surrounds himself with the stupidest people he could possibly find? Maybe,
and I think also.
But Miller's a smart guy, so I don't know.
Yeah,
maybe he just knows how to play the game. I don't know.
Yeah. I think Hegseth is brought in for optics, for the kind of like lowest common denominator war hawk conservative.
Yeah.
So be like, because these are the sorts of people, whether they're of the boomer generation or even some of like just the stupid war hawks amongst the younger generation. These are the people that still believe things like, we could have easily won in Vietnam if we didn't fight with one hand tied behind our back and blah, 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 blah. And so I think what Hegseth does is he panders to those people because he's like, we don't bother with woke military. We don't care about international law. We're just going to annihilate everybody. And so he's like an echo of Trump in that regard, but he's like, this younger guy who works out and, talks tough and has slick back hair and whatever. So I think he's there basically just as like a performance artist, but anybody who's not a low IQ, bloodthirsty war hawk looks at this guy and is like, this is someone, who is not a strong man, doing a bad impression of what he thinks a strong man is.
Yeah.
And this is just like a schoolyard bully who never grew up mentally. And I think of the way, whether it's like real, genuine, military war hero commanders like Dwight Eisenhower, or whether it's like champion, martial artists and stuff like that, they're usually not big mouth braggarts.
No.
With the occasional exception, they're usually very kind of modest and humble and low key.
Because they know what that leads to.
Yeah. And also they're confident. Like if if you're like a third degree black belt in jiu-jitsu or something like that, and you just know like not 1% of people in the world have a snowball's chance in hell against you, you're going to be confident and relaxed, and you're not going to be constantly bragging and talking trash and whatever, because the person who does that, I thought, learned this by the time we got out of grade school. The person who's like that is actually very insecure.
Yeah.
And is compensating for their insecurities with all that, big mouth, tough guy talk. Whereas the person who just has the quiet, calm confidence where, they'll let you know where the line is, but they don't have to constantly brag about themselves and talk trash and all this hyperbole and whatever like that. Those are the people, the low-key, confident, strong people are the ones that intelligent people respect.
Yeah.
And not the big mouth trash talker. But there is a constituency for that. There's a constituency for people who like their presidents and secretaries of state to talk like WWF heels, And that's, other than like Zionist donors, that's the main element of Trump's constituency that still supports him, is
I think
the
you're
people who want WWF trash talk as their statesman.
Yeah, the IQ of his followers has dropped precipitously the longer his administration has gone. Speaking of loudmouth braggarts, here's Trump talking about Oman.
Oh, yeah.
Interesting reading for people.
Mr. President, Iran wants control of the Strait of Hormuz. Would you accept a short-term deal that allows Iran and Oman to control the strait? And would they have to open it immediately, or would you be open to that happening over a period of time?
No, the strait's going to be open to everybody.
And who would control it?
It's international waters. Nobody's going to control it. We're going to watch over it. We'll watch over it, but nobody's going to control it. That's part of the negotiation that we have. They would like to control it. Nobody's going to control it. It's international waters, and Oman will behave just like everybody else, so we'll have to blow them up.
Can you imagine? You're Oman. You've been taking, you've been taking shrapnel. You've been taking missile shots because of the United States, attacking Iran, and you hear the United States say they're going to blow them up. Can you imagine? How does any country befriend the United States? Like, this is so terrible for us.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Trump is dumb enough, and I'm sure he's never actually read one history book in his life, and he's dumb enough to think that, like, this is how you get your way, is just by threatening and attacking and blustering and all this sort of stuff, where anyone who actually has studied even a little bit of real history, they know, like, no, all you do is turn allies and neutrals into enemies by behaving in this fashion, and you make yourself weaker. And, everybody else around the world is, like, increasingly sick of you, and, sooner or later, some of them are going to form into an alliance against you, and eventually you're going to end up actually overpowered potentially by all these people who you've pushed into this situation. Maybe they even liked the U.S. before,
right?
And generally thought well of us and were happy to be our allies. But increasingly, they're just like, I don't want to have anything to do with this. And it's insane the degree to which, I mean, it makes sense given his personality and everything, but it is insane to which the degree to which Trump has no sense of limits. Whether they be logistical, financial, geography, he has no sense of limits. And it struck me, I've been doing some research over the past few months into the Korean War, especially how the Korean War came to an end. And, I would argue that really the high point in many ways of American kind of civilization and society and all that relative to the rest of the world was 1953 to 1963. So right between Eisenhower ending the Korean War, by the way, like 6 months or so into his first term, he ran on, I'm going to end the Korean War, and he delivered in less than a year.
Yeah.
And then between that and then the assassination of JFK was like the closest thing to an actual golden age this country has ever had.
Yes.
And so that was the point at which, in relative terms, the U.S. had the most power relative to the rest of the world by almost every measure. And yet, that was when our leaders, both the presidents and even a lot of, not all, but a lot of their, cabinet officials and generals, those guys had a greater sense of limits. And so, like, you look at Eisenhower with Korea, like, he was a 5-star general. He knew that, yeah, if the U.S. military throws everything it has at North Korea and China, we can just brute force overpower them. But he also knew at what cost and how might that potentially escalate if the Soviets get involved. And so what if we end up winning a war like that? What kind of a victory is that? And he knew that it would destroy the American economy at home to escalate in Korea, and it would destroy the American economy at home even to just continue it, ad nauseum. And so, he was no wimp. He was a 5-star general.
Yeah.
But he was like, we got to get this thing wrapped up because, there's too many things that could go wrong. There's too much potential damage, political controversy at home. And so, to make sure we stay a prosperous, nice place to live in here at home, we need to wind this thing down and, try to avoid any more wars like this for the time being. And so there's this paradox where at the moment, 60 some years ago, when the U.S. actually did have relatively a lot more overwhelming power versus the rest of the world, is when we had leaders who were prudent and who acknowledged limits.
Yeah.
And now that we're like clearly a declining empire, and we're not even in we don't have the amount of relative power to the rest of the world that we had 20 years ago, let alone in the 50s and 60s. And yet now is when we have most of our leaders who are just like, do you think Lindsey Graham ever gives a second of, he gives less thought to the limits of American power than he does to the concerns of the people of South Carolina.
For sure.
And Donald Trump, I don't think he even knows what limits are. He just kind of believes that, as an arrogant, narcissistic psychopath, he can just, by force of will and personality, do anything. And no, I mean, actual military experts who are independent and speak the truth are like, no, we don't have the capabilities that we used to relative to the rest of the world. And, it would be nice if we had wise leaders who got into power who realized this and were willing to just kind of gradually wind down a lot of the American empire. Because otherwise, if you keep on this track of believing there's no limits when actually the limits are getting smaller and smaller every year as we, get bankrupt and all that, when you have those leaders who don't acknowledge limits despite a declining empire, that's a dangerous situation, because that's where you start. I mean, he's got a war in Iran he can't figure out what to do with. Meanwhile, he's like starving Cuba and threatening to occupy Cuba. Now he's going to blow up Oman. It's like, this is insane. Dwight Eisenhower was like, one war in Korea is too much. We need to wind it down right away.
Yes.
And this guy is like, no, you know what? Let's invade Greenland. Let's, who knows if Venezuela is even really over for good. I mean, it's been quiet for a while, but that could flare up into any kind of civil war or insurgency scenarios potentially. He has no sense of limits, and it's dangerous.
And it's completely dangerous. And then you'd think, like, Trump is known as a business. I mean, you can challenge us, but he's known generally as a businessman. He made all this money in business. He makes deals, whatever. And he's like the most belligerent leader that we've had in the White House. And for like, I don't even know the last time we've had anybody this belligerent. So it's not just, you make a good point with he's extending and threatening Cuba, of course. That might actually happen. I mean, he threatened after we're done with Iran, we're going to go after Cuba. It's like, what? But not only that, I mean, they're targeting, they're just indiscriminately targeting boats around Central America and South America too, like, and doing some land invasions into parts of Central, like we're doing covert ops in Central America right now that no one is even talking about, or barely anybody's even talking about, because the Iran thing is so important and scary and crazy and could lead to something much bigger. But like, why are we, what's the point of that? Like, we have completely neglected our hemisphere. We have a terrible relationship with our northern and should be closest ally in Canada. I mean, yes, they're crazy, but like, we didn't do anything to help them not be crazy. We've neglected them. We've neglected Mexico. We've neglected South America almost completely. And we share a lot of values with, like, Brazil is a great example. I know Tucker was talking about this. I have a Brazilian wife too, so I think about this too, but he was talking about this, I don't know, a few episodes ago. We share a lot in common with Brazil. Like, we have, both countries are huge land mass. They have 150 million people. I think we have 350 million, mostly Christian countries. Like I said, a lot of natural resources. There's so many reasons why we should partner. They have manufacturing. There's so many reasons why we should partner with great countries like Brazil in our own hemisphere and spend some time here economically with our own neighbors and befriending them. And instead, we're traipsing, what my grandma would say was galooping. We're galooping all over the Middle East, doing damage and killing people. I looked at, I was like, has the United States been responsible for really like over 1 million deaths in the Middle East since the war on terror started? And the number is much higher. It's like 3.5 or 4 million. Just if you think about the, some of the effects, the starvation and also non-access to medical care, et cetera. It's so bad. Like, so we spent the last 25 years killing 4.5 million people instead of doing deals and being productive with our neighbors on this hemisphere and seeking peaceful, voluntary interactions. It's like crazy to me. And then you elect this guy who's supposedly a great businessman, and all he wants to do is push people around militarily.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's very disturbing. And again, as a guy who's been studying history a lot for most of my life, it really bothers me because there was a time not that long ago when, like, a lot of our top leaders in the US and the Western world, for all of their faults and all of the, bad things some of them did and whatever, they were at least like somewhat educated. And
Yeah.
so they did have a sense of history that, was real. It was like, almost everybody who came out of any mid to upper level university education, like, was familiar with, the history of the Romans and the Greeks and the history of the Napoleonic Wars and like all these kind of just basic things that are the backstory of our civilization. And so to me, like, really knowing history should be a prerequisite for being a political leader or a statesman or diplomat or anything like that, because otherwise, it's like you've been dropped into the middle of a conversation that's been going on for thousands of years.
Right.
How the hell can you even know who's who and what's what and what they're doing if you don't know the backstory, at least to some extent?
No way you give Trump a map of the Middle East that he can, doesn't have names on it. He can put names on all those countries. No fucking way.
No. Yeah. I don't think he could pass like a typical 7th grade civics exam or something like that.
No way he knows all the states and capitals in the United States either. You give him a map. No way he knows.
Yeah, I mean, the only capital he cares about is Tel Aviv, I think.
That's right.
But, as you know, I've been working a lot lately on a mini-series I'm going to be putting out the first episode of soon about, a war in ancient Greece almost 2,500 years ago. And one of my big sources for that is the great Greek historian Thucydides and his History of the Peloponnesian War, which is like a very quotable source in a lot of ways. And it's amazing that in 2400 BC, when you've got sailboats and torches and nothing even like electricity and all this sort of stuff, here's this guy, this, ex-Athenian general who sat down to write a history of the decades-long Peloponnesian War. And it's so sophisticated, and there's so many themes that are like perfectly relevant to today, 2,400 years later. And one of the things that Thucydides really kind of keyed in on was the idea that war is always a really volatile, dangerous Pandora's box.
Yes.
And that once you open that box, you don't always get to decide where it goes. And it leads to all these second order effects like plagues and famines and political instability and revolution and civil wars. And, even the leaders that actually do prepare pretty well can sometimes tragically end up in disaster just because of bad luck and unforeseen events and things. And so he really stresses this idea of sort of prudence, of ideally you want a statesman who like kind of is able to look at things from many angles, who's able to think through multiple orders of effects and go, wait a minute, this war or even this strategy within a war looks like it might be the move, but if you look through the chain of events that's likely to follow, it's going to lead to negative things that are going to hurt us more in the end, even if this operation goes successfully. And there was a time when like most guys who were at the level of running for president or senator or, prime minister of the UK or whatever, they had read Thucydides. They had read, a lot of the great Roman historians, and they were familiar with the history of the Napoleonic Wars. And so they screwed up plenty, and they often did evil things that they knew they shouldn't have done. But at least they had a sense of like, the major pitfalls of war, that it always unleashes all these ripple effects, right? Like, yeah, people die from, not having clean water by the hundreds of thousands in a war, just random innocent people. They can't get clean water. And so like you better have a real good reason for opening that box, and you better have a really good plan for how to mitigate a lot of the worst, side effects that can happen, and have some contingency plans for, well, if this happens, we're going to counter it with that. We're going to adjust here. And then you look at the Trump administration, planning or lack thereof for this Iran war. There was nothing. There was not even, he literally was acting surprised that the Iranians would even try to close the Strait of Hormuz. Like, let alone the idea that huge amounts of innocent people are going to be in severe jeopardy of famine because of the fertilizer shortages caused by this nonsense. It just, I mean, I've always, struggled with trying to not get too depressed during my studies of history, because it's like, you just keep seeing the same things over and over and over again. But like this current regime in the US is way worse than average when it comes to not even getting any of the most basic lessons of history that frickin' Thucydides figured out and wrote down 2,400 years ago, or that Sun Tzu wrote down 2,500 years ago. It's like, these guys figured it out when they were still lighting their room with candles and torches. And here we are with our smartphones like, oh, let's just attack Iran and assume it'll be over in 2 days and we'll win.
We're supposed to be enlightened. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
Western enlightened. Like, how do you grow up in a Western enlightened society and think any of this is okay? And it's not just Trump. We mentioned Hegseth in his administration. You talked about some of this, like Lindsey Graham and Randy Fine is just an absolute piece of shit. How does this work? But not just them, but Scott Bessent wrote this. I think this was today too. Epstein's friend Scott, I like to call him. He said, I say this to Oman specifically. The U.S. will deal firmly with any nation that helps Iran impose tolls on the Strait of Hormuz. So you've got it's not just like Trump saying things off script, being kind of a crazy man. No, this is like this is like what you're supposed to say in the Trump administration. You get threats from all sides. I don't understand how you operate like this.
It's so strategically incompetent. So are they deliberately trying to push Oman into being Iran's closest ally and best friend?
Right.
And then the Israelis are continuing to talk trash about wanting to go to war against Egypt and
Turkey,
which are, the other two strongest military powers in the region, both of whom have like around 10 times as many people as Israel does. Each of which has 10 times as many people as Israel does, and, pretty serious military, especially Turkey. And do they really think like the best way to win a major war in the Middle East is to make Iran, Oman, Turkey, Egypt, and like as many other countries in that region, Lebanon, like drive them all into a militant, closely packed anti-U.S., anti-Israel alliance? Like that's the best way
they are
to
surrounded.
take over the Middle East?
Like that, they're surrounded and they're picking fights with everybody around them. It makes no sense that they would do that, because you're exactly right. I mean, I didn't even think about it in terms because they what was the war in the 1950s where didn't they fight Egypt, Jordan, and someone. These are not the same countries with the same military with the same population as it was 60, 70 years ago. These are advanced militaries who can do some damage.
Turkey in particular, the Turks have like always had effective, good military forces going way back to the days of the Ottoman Empire. But even in World War I, like they fought off the British and French and the Anzacs at Gallipoli. And, they've got one of the strongest armies in NATO other than the U.S. And they have a culture that's always produced high quality soldiers. So why you would, especially like it makes no strategic sense. If you were Israel, you would think they would want to take advantage of the fact that Turkey has been in NATO since the 1950s and say like, hey, let's through the Americans and through the NATO connection, let's make sure Turkey is like favorably disposed towards us, since they've got one of the best armies in the region. But no. Actually, I think it was Jonathan Pollard, right, the American traitor spy who Mike Huckabee loves. Because traitors of a feather flock together.
They do.
And yeah, Pollard I saw was like talking real big just recently about, I saw the video. We, the Israelis, we got to go to war against Turkey and Egypt real soon. It's like,
why would you want to? What do you think is going to happen? The United States can't step in there too, step in against Iran and Turkey, fellow NATO country Turkey and Egypt. Like, how is that? How do they think that that's going to work?
Yeah. Well, the title of my first episode on the Peloponnesian War that I'm going to be putting out soon, the title of the episode is The Mad Dream of Conquest. And it comes from a passage in Thucydides where he is relating a speech given by the Athenian leader Nicias, who actually had some wisdom and some prudence. And when Athens, the Athenians sort of more democratic faction within their politics tended to be more war hawks, and they were all like getting hopped up about, we're going to go invade Sicily and it'll be super easy, barely an inconvenience, and we're going to get all this wealth, and we'll win the Peloponnesian War against Sparta right next door to us by attacking Sicily 800 miles away. And Nicias gave multiple speeches to the assembly where he was like trying to talk them out of it. And he was making very rational cases of like logistically, geographically, strategically, why it didn't make sense, why it was likely to fail, why even if it was successful, it wouldn't really help them win the war against Sparta, all these things. But they were, instead listening to the demagogues who wanted to go to Sicily. And at the conclusion of one of his speeches, trying to talk them out of this, he says something like, "Don't give in to the mad dream of conquest." And to me, like that's Netanyahu in his greater Israel fantasy. It's the mad dream of conquest. It's like just this crazy belligerent delusion that's completely divorced from logistics and geography and resources and all these things. It's just madness.
You still have to like contend with. You'd think Netanyahu would also know that there are limitations to what the United States can do. He's not a dumb guy. You'd think that he would understand that the United States is a declining empire, and so maybe it makes sense now. We'll try to get the United States involved now before decline happens even more. This is our last chance or whatever, plus the demographics are changing, and of course, Americans as they get younger are not supporting Israel at all. But then to think like in the next 5 or 10 years that they could potentially take on Turkey or Egypt, do they think that the United States is going to... He has to know the limitations of what the United States can do. Does he think that that partnership with the United States is going to be enough to get them over the hump there too? And then what is there to gain? So with Egypt, maybe some territory, but like what's there to gain with Turkey? What's the point? Why would I would think that he'd be, I get the bloodlust and whatever, the fever dream of conquest or whatever, any of that. I get that, but like common sense has to take over. Like you have to understand that there's only so far you can take it before you're just going to destroy your own country. They are in dire danger of destroying their own country. I mean, they have nuclear weapons, and I guess when all is said and done, they could potentially use them, but they're also the IDF is having huge strain problems too. They are maxed with dealing with Gaza and the West Bank and southern Lebanon now. Like they're at their point of potentially breaking. So the only way they can do anything against any of these other countries is if they have some support. You think common sense would take over at some point, and that they would just be like, we're going to have to just stop right here. Like, okay, we're going to take southern Lebanon, and then we're just going to have to stop right here and just be peaceful and make peace. I don't know. Doesn't seem to be like they're letting up in any way, but I just don't see how they think that they can take on Turkey and Egypt.
Yeah. It's absolute madness. I guess because anyone who really is paying attention knows that Netanyahu has nothing but contempt for Americans. And,
he hates us.
Doesn't really give a shit what happens to us. So, maybe in his head, he's like, well, if I can get the Americans to like come all in on a almost World War level war in the Middle East to knock out every significant military power in the region other than us, then it's fine if at that point the United States empire is completely collapsing and completely bankrupt and whatever. Then it's fine if they leave because we're like the last man standing. And, then all of these other countries in the region that used to be relatively powerful states, they're going to be like, they expedite the chaotic collapse, right? From all those neocon documents from the 90s and 2000s where the Israelis and their American, helpers were basically saying like, yeah, we want to have most of the Middle East be composed of chaotic countries with constant civil wars and ethnic, breakdown and all this sort of stuff, because then we're the only kind of coherent state in the Middle East that has a cohesive, organized government and a coherent military that's not busy fighting itself. And so then we can kind of do whatever we want. So maybe that's his gamble, is that like he's going to try and get the U.S. empire to like expend its last significant push that it has left as it bankrupts and destroys itself on Israel's behalf. And then he doesn't care what happens next. He doesn't care if the dollar collapses to toilet paper and, the American people descend into civil war as they're, facing famine or something like that.
No.
Doesn't care as long as he gets what he wants.
Yeah, well, he's going to have to do it fast because there's no way. I don't think that the next president is going to get elected if they're as aligned with Israel as Trump has been. I just don't think the American people will stomach that, no matter who is running. I think whoever survives a primary is not gonna be an Israel hawk. So I'm not sure. He just doesn't have. Yeah. Well, luckily, there's a nice third party that will save us from all of this ridiculousness, and that would be the Libertarian Party that had its national convention last week. I know we talked a little bit about this before we started today, but did you see some of the fallout of that? And I'm very interested in getting your thoughts. I'll just kind of set. Oh, you go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, I've only followed it a little bit. So, yeah, if you want to kind of give the story, not just for the listener, the viewer's benefit, but for mine,
for sure.
Because I admit I don't know a ton of detail about this story.
I'm not so I don't belong to the Libertarian Party because I'm a small libertarian. So, I think that I don't think we're going to achieve liberty through the political process. However, I do see why certain people decide to dedicate their lives to it because, there's incrementalism. You might be able to stop some encroachments that way. It's just I don't want to spend my life doing that. So I don't belong to the Libertarian Party. But I was hopeful through the Dave Smith and Angela McArdle era and Tom Woods era, I guess. He was, I think, more behind the scenes because, like, you could see that libertarian ideas were starting to really become national topics. And they were able to make some progress. Number one, Trump was at the Libertarian Convention in 2024, National Convention in 2024, to get a presidential contender and a former president there is like crazy. And he wasn't the only one. I think Kennedy was there too, and Vivek was there as well. So there were a lot of eyes, big spotlight on the Libertarian Party, which I thought was really positive. And then, they're directly, Angela probably in particular, directly responsible for getting Ross out of prison. I mean, that wouldn't have happened unless they really pushed. Now, so there was some effectiveness. You could then say, well, Trump has been a complete disaster. And a lot of libertarians who voted for Trump now feel bad about it, including Dave Smith. He says he feels like he took that as a loss for endorsing the guy and for voting for him. And I know he doesn't feel great about it, but I don't blame him for doing that. It seemed like the best move at the time, given the past 4 years of Biden, and then the potential of what could happen if Kamala was going to take over after him. I didn't vote. I didn't endorse him, but I typically don't. But I kind of hoped that he would win. So anyway, so I thought that was a very positive, and there was some great momentum in the Libertarian Party, and there was room for optimism during it. But then afterwards, once McArdle left, Angela, you got to give a lot of credit to Angela. She just had a way of she had there was a strategy, and she was able to execute in a way that was impressive to me. So anyway, but then after that, the next batch got really stupid, and then this one seems to get stupid. So, okay, the Libertarian National Convention happened last week, and we're so far removed from the Mises takeover of 2023 and 2024. There, like that whole movement is completely gone. And what now the Libertarian Party looks like is a big joke. The convention was mired, is now like, it's just a laughing stock what happened. First of all, before it ever started, there was this whole debate about dress code that spilled out kind of publicly. And then during the convention, a couple things happened. One, you had one member of this woman named Alexa Maffei, and I'm not exactly sure where she's from, but she went over to the Libertarian Party of New Hampshire's booth, stole a bunch of stuff, apparently said, I'm going to put this where it should go, which is the trash can. She was confronted. She pushed someone, and then a member of the Libertarian Party of New Hampshire slapped her hard across the face. That guy ended up getting arrested. And that, like, none of this was good. Like, no one was right. Obviously, she shouldn't have stolen from the Libertarian Party of New Hampshire's booth. And obviously the guy, I mean, yes, theft is wrong, and it's whatever. Theoretically, you can say that violence is appropriate for someone who is stealing from you, but you don't you didn't have to do that. You didn't have to slap her across the face. Like that's just so stupid. So he acted dumb, she acted dumb. And then the fallout was the new Libertarian Party leadership disaffiliated the Libertarian Party of New Hampshire. And it was a vote of, or the new board, I guess, was a 15-2 vote. And the reason that they're citing is because the Libertarian Party of New Hampshire in 2024 endorsed Trump, and apparently that's against the bylaws of the Libertarian Party. But that's stupid too, because it's not the same leadership. Like, you should have done that in 2024 if that was a problem. It's a whole different leadership group at the LPNH right now. So they didn't take part in that. And so it just seemed like a revenge, because you got a lot of sort of leftist libertarians. I don't even understand the concept of being a leftist libertarian, but a lot of leftist libertarians who've taken over the leadership of the Libertarian Party, and they have a grind, or they've got an issue with sort of the right-leaning Libertarian Party in New Hampshire. So that's kind of the synopsis of everything. And I'll just say, I'll just kind of finish on this. Like, the LPNH, to me, they're very aggressive in their, and I've noticed actually the Libertarian Party in Florida is like happy that the LPNH is disaffiliated. I think that's shameful. Should not have been disaffiliated. And I think they're fucking wrong, no matter what their opinion is of basically this is all about the messaging that the LPNH does through their Twitter. Very aggressive. I don't agree with it. 20% of the time I don't agree with it. They get into some race stuff that I just don't, it's not me. Don't like that stuff. But it is the LPNH is the only successful Libertarian Party probably in the country. Their partnership, of course, with the Free State Project has moved New Hampshire towards liberty, where everybody else is going in the opposite direction. I would say New Hampshire's actually going towards liberty. If you just look at a number of the laws that have passed, taxes have been reduced, constitutional carry, decrim, marijuana, right to try, like a bunch of stuff that they've done, homeschool, affirmation, like all sorts of stuff. They have probably maybe the only place in the world that has taken small steps, but steps towards liberty, where everybody else is going 100 miles per hour in the other direction. No other state can say that they've kept up with New Hampshire. So most successful, and fine, you don't like the branding or the language that they use. It's very provocative, but they're also extremely effective in getting eyeballs. And they've got the biggest Twitter account of all the affiliates in the country. New Hampshire's a state size of has 1.6 million people. It has 100 and something, I don't know, 120,000 Twitter followers, makes the news, so they're very successful. So that's how I feel about them. I have a soft part in my heart, of course, from them being from New Hampshire, and they're successful. So the disaffiliation, I think, is shameful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've never had a huge amount of faith in the usefulness of the Libertarian Party overall.
Yeah.
And I think for a bunch of reasons. I mean, one of them is that a political party, in order to be effective, has to be mostly pretty unified and disciplined. And the types of people that are libertarians are not the types of people that are good at that. And there's so many different little subgroups within it that, like, you can't get them to agree on much. That you've got, like, some people who sound pretty much like a woke leftist in the same party as, your Mises people and people who sound even more like hard right-wingers than that, and, other factions besides. So, yeah, it's a herding cats problem for sure. And then there's also the strategic dilemma of, do you, like what you were saying about the New Hampshire party, do you focus on state and local things where you might actually be able to get some, like, genuine, wins? You might actually be able to get some seats in the state legislature and some little positions here and there, especially if you've got a decently libertarian-leaning Republican Party that you can sort of, like, to some degree ally with, and maybe even with the Democratic Party on the occasional issue like legalizing certain drugs or whatever. You might be able to do more at the local level, especially if you have people in that state party who are friendly to ideas of like decentralization and secession, who and nullification and those sorts of things, where they can try to carve out little niches in their state that might technically go against certain federal laws, but they can get away with it in some cases, as we've seen over the years with certain things relating particularly to guns and weed. So, you can make an argument that that's where you get the most done. On the other hand, if you see the Libertarian Party primarily as a platform for spreading a message, more so than, trying to, in the short run, make substantive changes that incrementally improve liberty, then you would move towards like, well, why are we wasting all of these resources, money, manpower on all these state and local things that, like, yeah, great, now you can carry a switchblade legally in this county or this state. Oh, now you can carry a pistol without a permit. Okay, but if you're having no influence at all on the federal level, how much good is that really going to do? And so I don't know. I've always seen that as an unsolvable dilemma, and I'm not coming down on either side of that. Like I see it as a legit dilemma. Both things are valuable, but the party already has such limited resources and manpower that if you're trying to spread them significantly across both the state and local and the federal, particularly the presidential election, I see it as you're fighting a many front war. And you're already outnumbered, and you're trying to fight equally strongly on all fronts, and that's a great way to just spread your resources too thin and get defeated in detail by your opponents. Whereas, do a Stonewall Jackson move where you beat a bigger army than you by just, concentrating all your forces on dispersed elements of their forces. So I've never been able to, even in my own mind, let alone seeing whatever I think get implemented by this party, I've just never seen a good way to overcome this strategic dilemma in a country as large as ours with a federal system. Where do you put the focus? And then there's the optics thing, right? You would think that as a party that by definition is quote unquote a fringe party, just numerically speaking, that you'd be very concerned about optics. And especially today, given the fact that so many of the people that are in high positions in the two mainstream parties seem like idiots and nut jobs. I mean, you've got the Democrats being a bunch of woke lunatics. And then you've got the Republicans being a bunch of really low IQ, deranged warmongers, who are just beholden to Israel. And it's like, imagine a third party that comes across like its main spokesmen and leaders and whatever seem professional. They seem, organized and disciplined, like not stupid, mindless talking point regurgitators, but like seem like they actually know what they're talking about. And, people that the viewers at home watch them and go, oh my God, this party I barely even heard of. Every time I see one of their people in front of a TV camera, they sound intelligent and they sound reasonable and they sound like they could be trusted to be put in charge of something. Meanwhile, it's the Democrats and Republicans who these days are sounding like the nut jobs. But that doesn't work if you've got all of these, nutcases. Because that's what the establishment media is going to focus on.
That's exactly what they're going to do.
Even if 95% of the people at the Libertarian Convention are like well put together, professional seeming, intelligent seeming people, the handful of percent that are, running around with no pants on or whatever are going to be the ones that get all the headlines. That's just how it's going to work. Yeah,
it should be Tom Woods, but that's not what we're getting. Like it should be that guy. Like, oh, this guy's if anybody who listens to Tom Woods, I've heard him on his podcast a million times, but then also different presentations and speeches he's given. And he's like, you listen to that guy and you're like, you can't help but think, oh man, this is a credible, professional, moral person. That's what you want in terms of leadership. You want that to be the face of your political party and not a fucking lunatic.
Yeah. Because you're pushing ideas that are already considered quote unquote radical and extremist.
That's right.
And so if your messenger also comes across as like a fringe person, and I like some of the fringy people, just as individuals or whatever. I pretty much avoid wearing a suit as much as I can my entire life. I'm allergic to ties, but at the same time, it's like if you're trying to sell what are already considered fringe ideas to a more mainstream audience, it's really important that your messengers not appear to be crazy fringe, counterculture, immature sort of children.
That's right. So to answer your question, though, because I do have an opinion on how you fight this battle, and I think that the kind of the McArdle era. I wish it were Dave Smith that would have run for president that year, because I think we would have had that another person who's very credible, very moral sounding person who's got a big audience is Dave Smith. Of course, if he ended up running for president, I think it would have done more for the party and for the cause of freedom than what ended up happening. But what they still did was they got concessions from the party that would listen to them, the Republican Party. They got concessions. It didn't turn out as good as we'd hoped. We'd hoped that Doge, would have bring in Elon, bring in Vivek to go and nuke the size of the federal government. That didn't work out, but the Ross thing did. Anyway, there were concessions there to get votes from libertarians. That's what the Libertarian Party should be doing during an election year. And then, there's I think the best option we have is, and it's the only successful thing that I've seen really, is what the Free State Project is doing. It's get a bunch of people to pledge to move to a small state where they will have outsized influence and go to a state that already has a pretty pro-liberty streak anyway, of industrious people who are self-sufficient. Go there, get as many liberty people to move there as possible, liberty-friendly people, libertarians, to move there as possible, and start to influence the state government there. It's worked. Like it's not a voluntarist heaven at this point, but they're moving forward towards liberty instead of away from it. It's worked. So then I think you have to support projects like that. From the national level, they should support projects like that. They should. If I were national, I would say, let's create a libertarian homeland. Let's do that. Let's put all our focus there. So that's what I think you do. I think you support the projects that actually are working across the country, and then you act to get concessions from whatever major party will offer it, whether it's Democrat or Republican. It doesn't really matter as long as they are doing stuff towards the cause of freedom. I mean, probably it's not going to be the Democrats because they want to open the border, change the demographics and all that stuff, and we just can't abide by that. But most likely it's Republican Party. But we were influential in that in that presidential year, and it's because Libertarian Party acted with strategy, and they're not really doing that anymore. So I don't have a lot of hope for the near term with the Libertarian Party, I will say.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens with Tom Massie going forward. I actually think he would be wasted in the Libertarian Party.
Agreed.
In the same way that when Ron Paul ran as the Libertarian candidate, what was it, a couple of times in the 80s? It really didn't make much of an impact.
Right.
Whereas when he ran in the Republican primary both times, it made a big impact, even though he never, had a snowball's chance of winning that primary. And I think Massie is, especially lately, he's more kind of articulate and charismatic than Ron Paul. Much as I love Ron Paul,
Totally.
never the greatest, orator or most charismatic guy. And Massie seems like he's really upped his game. Like, I don't know if he's been,
coached.
He's a super smart guy. So like maybe he's reading books about like how to, be a more compelling speaker and be more charismatic and whatever. But like, I think he's upped his game in that regard.
Agreed.
And, he was the guy who stood up to almost everybody over the Epstein files, and he's got this credibility, and if you took the boomers out of the GOP, I think that Massie is the odds-on favorite to get the nomination pretty handily.
Yeah.
Because his position on most issues lines up with especially Republicans like under the age of 55 or something
Yeah,
like
it's
that.
not even the youth. It's just anybody who's not a boomer.
Yeah, yeah.
Basically, yeah. I hope he
so-
runs as an independent in Kentucky and wins there. I mean, I don't know if he would win, but he would, like, the Republicans would lose, and that would be, I don't know, just reward for the Republican Party in Kentucky.
You mean runs as an independent in the current midterm?
I think I would like to see him do that. I don't know that he would, but I think he should. And
that would be interesting.
I mean, maybe he could win. I don't know, but I don't know. But there's no way that the Republican would win. The Democrat would win, or Massie would win. It would kill it would kill what's his face, the forgotten man. No one remembers his name.
Ed Gallbladder.
Yes,
Gallstone.
Gallstone. Well, yeah. I mean, I'd like to see Matt. I don't know that he can win, but it would be good to get him. I agree. I don't think it makes sense for him to go into the Libertarian Party. There's no reason for him to do that. He should just run as a Republican. He's won as a Republican in the past, so just do it that way. He won't win as a Libertarian, but and he won't be in any of the debates. It won't matter. But if he's a Republican, he'll be in the debates. He'll get the message out at least, and we'll see what happens. I mean, yeah, it looks like it's probably going to be Rubio, but Rubio, no one likes Rubio. No one really likes him besides the real what's left of MAGA and the Israel lobby.
The neocons,
The neocons, basically. So
the neocons like him because he is, basically an across-the-board John Bolton warhawk.
Yeah.
But he, most of the time, comes across as a grown-up who knows what he's talking about. Like, I think he's wrong about almost everything, but he, at least in terms of, like, the optics and the superficial stuff, most of the time... There was that famous primary debate where he accidentally... the talking point record in his head was skipping, and he kept repeating the same talking points. It was about Barack Obama doesn't know what he knows exactly what he's doing, and he kept repeating like the same exact talking point phrases multiple times in the debate, even when they didn't really address the question. And it was the only time I was like clapping for Chris Christie. Chris Christie was the one who pointed it out and took him down, and I think knocked him out of the maybe it was the 2012 or 2016 Republican presidential primary. It was the one time I was clapping for Chris Christie. But most of the time when his wires don't get crossed and get on skipping record mode, most of the time Rubio is able to superficially sound like he knows what he's talking about and he's professional and whatever. And I think that's a big part of his appeal. And then I also think that there are some cynical higher ups in the Republican Party who are like, he's Hispanic. So, they think in the same way the Democrats do, of like, we'll just pander to that. And they don't even bother to realize, like, well, he's Cuban, which plays well in Florida, but like not all the other, Latin American groups in the U.S. Identify with the Cubans. Like Cubans aren't the same thing as Mexicans and Puerto Ricans and blah, 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 blah. And so it's not necessarily a given that just because he's Hispanic, all the Hispanics that normally vote Democrat are going to, jump ship for him.
Actually,
I think that's part of their thinking.
Probably that's true. I think no matter what they do, they lose in 2028, except if Massie gets through and is the nomination, then Massie could win because he'd get enough from both. He'd get enough independents, but I think beyond that, they're going to get destroyed.
Probably, yeah. Although a lot of it also depends on circumstances and like what happens over the next
that's true.
Couple of years. It'll be interesting, and it'll be interesting to watch these midterms. I swear that Trump is like deliberately trying to lose in the biggest tidal wave ever seen for a presidential party, getting shellacked in the midterms. I don't like everything he says and does. It's like he's deliberately trying to lose the midterms in the biggest landslide ever.
He keeps telling us he hates the middle class, like over and over. He doesn't care about our financial future. I'm not even thinking about that stuff. No shit, You're not thinking about anything. You're not thinking about Americans. No shit, we know it. But do you think it's a good idea to keep telling everybody that?
He keeps saying the quiet part out loud. And I've heard a few kind of like mental health experts, psychologists and people like that talking about Trump's mental state and everything. And one guy in particular, I can't remember his name, but he's a pretty like distinguished professor of psychology or psychiatry at Johns Hopkins, who's been warning about Trump's psychological state for years. And what he said that I found pretty compelling was he said, look, Trump has always been a virulent narcissist and a psychopath or a sociopath, but he now, this guy was arguing, he believes that Trump has a particular type of dementia that's different from like Joe Biden's dementia or other kind of common forms of dementia. I think it was called frontal temporal dementia or something like that. And so he was saying that when you have a person who's got like severe personality disorders like Trump has had his entire life, when they start to get this particular type of dementia, what happens is the personality defects become more obvious because they no longer have the frontal lobe self-control to realize, like, I've got to pretend to not be a psychopath when I'm on camera. And so it's like he's even more than, say, in his first term, he is, without even realizing it, saying the quiet part out loud constantly. And so, whereas 8 years ago, he might have been with it enough to go, yeah, I don't give a shit about the middle class and I'm just going to help my donors. But he would be with it enough that if he's in front of a camera or a microphone, he's not going to say that. He's going to say, oh, I'm working for you, blue collar and middle class America. I'm fighting for the little guy, but now it's like he's got the same type of dementia that causes old people to like say really insulting things to people because the filter just is gone. They meet a person who's obese and they're just like, oh, you're pretty fat, aren't you? They like, basically he's got that. And so he's even worse than he used to be at camouflaging his psychopathy. And I was like, that actually makes sense.
Could explain it.
Like why is he even crazier than he was in his first term?
Yeah, that could explain it. And because he would be way better off. I mean, it's nice that we know how he really thinks and what he really believes, but he would be way better off if he kept that shit quiet. And it would be better off for all Republicans running for office in the country right now. But yeah, maybe that's the reason. Do you think, I want to ask you this, do you think sociopaths love their family?
Sometimes it can appear that they do, but my understanding is, I mean, first off, some of them are like really abusive to their family in like insane ways that are just horrifying when you find out about it. But there are some who aren't that way and do, by all appearances and accounts, treat their family relatively well. But it's a weird sort of a thing where it's still not like love and affection the way a normal decent person feels for like his wife and kids or whatever. It's in a more kind of like possessive way, and in a way where they love their family in the same way that they might love a fancy sports car that they're able to buy because they conned a bunch of people out of their money. They don't like really love it. It's like a trophy to them.
Yeah, belongs to them.
And so when you see Trump, like weirdly, creepily bragging about how attractive one of his daughters is or something like that, it's like, that's what I think is going on there. And, the moment a family member is not serving that role well as like a trophy for the sociopath, he'll just sort of, walk away from them, blacklist them, whatever. And it is funny to see about like Trump did not attend his own son's wedding,
right?
And claimed it was because he had important White House business. And a lot of people were speculating, oh no, is he going to escalate the Iran war? It's like, no, he just wanted to play golf instead.
Yeah.
It's like, you got to wonder what's really going on behind the scenes there.
I'd like to. I've known him for a long time. Did you hear him say that?
yeah. That was pretty bizarre. I was like, I'm not sure if he's joking or just this is another, senile episode. But
I sort of wondered about the sociopath and what they can do, because like I look at someone like Randy Fine, who is okay with certain babies getting blown up, but I would imagine he would not be okay with like his own family members being blown up. And like, I just don't understand that as a human, as a Western enlightened human who's grown up, like, how do you not have some sort of moral code that starts with some sort of first principles, whether it's like the Bible is a first principle, or for me, I start it, reality exists and I exist in it. I believe that, and I can get to the non-aggression, the NAP from there, non-aggression principle from there, just with a series of logic steps. But like Randy, like I don't understand how you don't have a universal principle, how you like look at some babies and say, no, they should die, and like, and laugh about it. And other people, like, is that a sociopath, or is that just someone who, I don't understand the psychology there, where you can look at one baby and be, kill them, that baby, no, I love them. Like, I don't understand that.
Yeah. And like, I can understand, if you're in some like ridiculous dilemma of some crazy guy has a gun pointed at, your child and someone else's child, and is like, I'm going to shoot one of them. Which one? Like,
okay.
Of course you say like, shoot the other one if you're going to shoot somebody. But like, to like, cheer with glee when children of a different, ethnicity or whatever are just getting slaughtered. I think what that is, and Fine may also be a sociopath in addition to this, but I think what it is that a lot of the most hardcore Zionists and, Israeli politicians and everything, even some of them may not be like clinically, technically psychopaths and sociopaths, but they act like them because they have essentially reverted to Bronze Age tribalism. Morality.
Yeah.
Yep. And that's something that we're pre-wired for, all of our existence from the Stone Age through the Bronze Age into, the Iron Age, and in some parts of the world, never really stopped.
Yeah.
But yeah, between, Christianity and the Enlightenment and, various other things, like in the West, we transcended tribalism, never perfectly or fully, but at least in terms of like what we strove to, right? We had the idea of, we shouldn't be happy to slaughter someone just because they're of a different tribe than we are, if we don't have to, if there's not a good reason of like defending ourselves. But yeah, the hardcore Zionists, that's their morality. Their morality is like the Old Testament, right? This Bronze Age morality where God says, go in and slaughter every single Amalekite or whatever that you find, including the women and children and the old disabled people. And like, if God finds out that they left a couple of them alive, God's like pissed with them, like, no, I told you to slaughter all of them. And like that's the morality of the hardcore Zionists. So
stuck in the Old Testament.
Yeah. Stuck in the Old Testament, stuck in the Bronze Age. And, and I think some of them, it's just trauma of the Holocaust that put them in that mindset where they were like, well,
but Randy
guess,
has never like he's not a sufferer. I mean, he's you know what I mean. Maybe his I don't know what his family was, but
but some of them, if they grow up in like certain families and schools and groups and things, they're propagandized from toddlerhood with this deliberately traumatic narrative that deliberately cultivates heavy paranoia in them of like at any moment, every Gentile in America might just turn on you and become, a neo-Nazi and want to kill every one of you. So you got to always be prepared. And that's why you can't let someone even mildly criticize Israel, because if you let them do that tomorrow, they're going to be, throwing you in a gas chamber. And they're propagandized in this mindset, this very paranoid, irrational mindset. And, melded with this tribal thing. And so like the lesson that some of these extreme Zionists seem to have learned from the Holocaust isn't like, wow, it's bad for people to like dehumanize and slaughter other people for being different. It's like, no. The lesson we learned is we don't want to be on the receiving end. We want to be on the giving end of that kind of behavior. And so the morality is just us versus them tribalism, not, in a moral philosophical sense, like, is it right to aggress against someone else or not? Instead, it's like, whatever my tribe does that helps us at the expense of the other tribes is good.
Yeah,
and that's pretty much it.
I can sort of see the logic behind, man, that shit's ugly, but we just have to do it. Like, it's existential for us. We just have to do it, and it's ugly, and I hate it, and I hate seeing this. Like, I can sort of, like, see the logic there, but just to be gleeful about it like he is. I mean, he sees the same shit on social media that I do. I'm sure he sees all the damage and trauma and in Gaza and South Lebanon. Like I saw the most horrible thing a couple days ago, which was in South Lebanon, a toddler, I don't know. She was near a blast and like her foot was almost severed off. Like I saw the image on Twitter. I'm like, this is fucking horrible. Like, how do you as a human not think that that is the most despicable, like shitty, horrible thing to come across your feed? And he looks at that type of stuff and is like, I sleep fine. Like, this is great. I love this. And fuck Timcast for having Randy Fine on your fucking program. You asshole.
I didn't
You don't
even
have
know
Clint.
that.
You have
Wow.
Clint. You don't put Clint on your program anymore because you can't defend yourself against your support for Israel. But you have Randy Fine, fucking idiot number one, and bloodthirsty idiot number two. You have him on your podcast. Fuck you, dude.
Yeah,
fuck
I stopped following him at all, Tim Pool at all, and lost all respect for him a long time ago. He just
bad
clearly,
scene.
has, whether he's being paid to do it or whether he actually believes these things, he seems to have, for a long time at least, had a very strong neocon streak in him on foreign policy for sure.
Yeah. Well, okay, I think that's kind of what I had to talk about with the libertarian stuff. And I don't know if there's anything else we need to talk about before we wrap up, but tell me.
Yeah, no, nothing real urgent that I feel I got to get off my chest this week that we haven't already hit upon. I hope next week we have the good news of, wow, against all odds and expectations, Trump and the Iranians managed to figure out a way to have peace, and Trump told Netanyahu to, just deal with it, and Netanyahu didn't do a false flag to start World War III in response, and whatever, and the famine that's going to be coming in like 6 months or a year is only going to be a mild one, not a really draconian one. Fingers crossed that next week that's the story we'll be analyzing is, wow, against all of our expectations, like they somehow figured it out and everything's going to kind of normalize again. But I wouldn't put my money on it.
Here's hoping. All right. Well, thanks everybody for listening, and we'll catch you on the next one. See y'all.
You wear the flag on your dress like a cataract. The dual colors see the truth and then feel